Fair. No, I think it speaks in part, Mr. Kennedy, to the issue of trust that I know you've spoken about in the past, and is certainly something that's resonating on the campaign trail. I mean, I guess one question that I am curious about is whether you, for example, would go back to Congress, give more testimony, if you have any views of just the current roster that is in the House, and who do you admire among that group?
Well, I will talk to Congress anytime that they want me to testify. You know, the last time I went up there, it was a very strange situation, as you know, as you saw. But we need to respect the democratic institution in this country. We need to fortify them right now. There are so many threats to our democracy out there, and particularly with the emergence of all these new technologies that like AI technology and all these surveillance technologies. We live in a time where we really need to be bolstering the institutions of our democracy rather than disrespecting them or tearing them down. So, of course, if Congress asks me, I'm going to go testify.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your policies. Let's take the border, for example. Where you differentiate from what President Biden is doing and where you agree, but let's look, what would you be doing differently with the U.S. economy right now?
Well, on the border, I would not be having an open border. There have been, the border, I've been to the border and I've watched what's going on there, and it's shocking. The border, we've turned our immigration policy over in this country to the Mexican drug cartels. And I watch bus after bus owned by the cartels coming up to the border wall and letting each one of them 55 passengers. In fact, the night I was there, I saw about 300 people come across, and only two families were Latin American or Central American. There were one family from Peru and another from Colombia. But most of them were just from Africa and from Asia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China. And they were people, for the most part, who didn't even claim to have asylum claims. They said, when I asked, because I interviewed almost all the people who came across that night, except for the African group who came across first and were being processed by the time I got to them. And so I wasn't allowed to talk to them. It's all illegal. And yet the Mexican drug cartels are advertising all over the world saying, send us $15,000 and we will get you into the United States. And they're doing that. And the people who came across, had TikTok. They were where they'd seen the videos on TikTok and YouTube. They knew exactly what was going to happen to them. They knew the Border Patrol would process them immediately and then provide them with a plane ticket to go anywhere in the country they wanted. And it's not a good thing for our country, and it's not a good thing for them. I saw them, it's a humanitarian crisis. These people were extorted, exploited, they were robbed, raped in one case that we talked to.
You saw somebody being raped?
No, we never saw anybody, but we talked to people. And we visited the center and spent a half a day at the center that treats the people who've been raped on the way over, and many of them children as young as 11 years old. And there's a center in Yuma, a medical center just for children who have been sexually abused crossing the border. 85,000 children have disappeared.
Mr. Kennedy, I just want to double check on the border issue before we move on to some of the other issues. Does it matter where they're from? I mean, you're sort of trying to correct some misimpressions that it's all people from Latin America. Does it really matter if they're also from China and Africa and other places?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the people, the impression is that people who are coming across the border are all people from Central America and Latin America who have asylum claims, who are fleeing tyranny, oppression, murder threats in their own country for their political beliefs. And And that is not what I saw. And there may be a lot of cases like that. And those people, one of the things I'll do as president is to make sure that we have enough asylum judges to adjudicate those cases fairly at the border and make sure that people who need protection are brought in, but the people who are making frivolous claims are not allowed into our country. We need to control our borders. We need to widen the gates to make it, a path for citizenship much easier for people who are legally applying and getting in line. But we can't have the Mexican drug cartel control our immigration. And the people who I saw come across are walking into a nightmare in our country. And here's why. They're given court dates that are 7 miles in the future. For 7 years, they're going to live in our country. And they are, there's 100,000 now that have landed in New York. They're crushing the social service system in New York City. It's costing billions and billions of dollars. They're preyed upon because they don't have work papers and they can't get them over that 7-year period.
No, it is a human tragedy. I mean, it sounds in a bit like you're more aligned with the sort of GOP stance on that particular issue. Is that fair to say?
Well, whatever alignment. Listen, I work alongside with Cesar Chavez, who is my father's, strongest ally.
Right.
20 years. And he had 2 issues. The one I was working with him on, when I was a pallbearer in his funeral. When I was working on with pesticides, the other big issue he has was closing the border. Because he saw that it was eroding the bargaining leverage for American workers. It was lowering their wages. His farm workers were being harmed by the open borders policies at that time. And he was at the center of the Democratic Party, as was my father. I don't think Democrats or Republicans, are really interested traditionally in having an open border. We need asylum for people around the country, that's around the world. What I'm trying to tell you is the people who are motivated by saying, these are humanitarian issues, we need to open the border to be kind to people. The people who are coming across are not being, it's not a kind atmosphere. They're landing here, they're preyed upon by unscrupulous employers who pay them $5 or $6 an hour, and they're working for food because they cannot get a place to stay. They're living on the sidewalks, working for food, lowering the wages for American workers, crushing our social safety system, and making our country less safe. It's not a good thing for anybody, including them. So maybe people who are concerned about this issue because of misogyny or xenophobia or racism or some kind of a cruel form of nationalism. But that's not where I come from to come to this issue. I come from this issue from a humanitarian concerns and compassion.
I think that's fair. I mean, let's talk a little bit